Hello, Broadell fans. We're going to learn about the Mediterranean a bit more today and move on to Broadell's next section, the Foothills and Plateaus. Fuck. Alright, but before I begin talking, I would like to talk about the state of the channel. So obviously, I've been a bit inactive. And what I was doing is I was finishing the Mediterranean. And now that I'm all done with that, I'm going to be starting to produce these, hopefully weekly. Fuck, I'm taking on Broadell's other grand series, Civilization and Capitalism, during this period. So that might make me a bit busy, but nowhere as busy as the Mediterranean. But I'm sorry about all that, and without further ado, let's start talking about the plateaus. So, plateaus are a bit different from the mountains. Plateaus are as flat as the plains, but they're just as tall as the mountains. And it's in plateaus where the soil is a bit harder, agriculture is somewhat difficult, because the soil's hard. You have various canyons everywhere. And because of you have all these canyons, this leads to mules and mule trains being very present in these plateaus and canyons. Okay, where the fuck is everyone? So beasts of burden, such as mules, donkeys, and all of that, are very important here. A great example of a society dominated by the plateaus is Old and New Castile. They'd transport all of Castile's stuff, wool, everywhere. It's also in the canyons. Fucking... that transhumanists is present. So we have a lot of shepherds, taking down their flocks into the plains in the winter and up to the mountains in the summer, or in this case, the plateaus. Castile was very renowned for its wool, its production of merino wool, and proved to be quite a good source throughout Europe. So those are some aspects of the plateaus. I mean, what would Castile be like without that wool industry from the plateaus? And the plateaus are a bit different from the mountains, because you also have roads because how flat they are. Transporting goods and services, people, is much easier in the plateaus. Holy shit. Fucking 10-year-olds. Alright, now we should move on to the foothills. So, a lot of foothills are defined by their proximity to mountains. All of them are very close to mountains. So, in a lot of literature from the foothills, they'll actually mention the nearby mountains and romanticize them a bit. The fuck do you go? Anyways, foothills are a lot like the mountains. You can see them in the Apennines, for example. They have a lot of urbanized villages, and they are difficult to traverse, but they generally have a higher population than plateaus. That's what makes them different. Again, like in the plateaus, transhumanists is a vital part of the regions. They possess a pretty wide variety of resources, like the mountains, but to a lesser extent. Alright, and now let's talk about the hills. The hills, are, again, like the mountains. They aren't necessarily, next to mountains like foothills. However, they have a greater agricultural capacity, and they're much more urbanized than normal hills. I mean, foothills. Brodell says that these are among the most stable of Mediterranean. He brings up are Provence and Tuscany. And you know, I think those are pretty stable myself. And he brings up this letter from one Vidal Le Blanche, who travels the Apennines, and he says, a moment, at this altitude is situated a series of Castelli Romani. Come on, let me say my fucking quote, you loser. Around the Roman Campagna, surrounding the ancient Oppida, bordering the fringe of the Pontine marshes, upon the slopes of the Volscians and age-old cities, god damn it, commanding the almost deserted approaches to ancient Etruria. So obviously, in this example, in the Apennine Range in Tuscany, we can definitely see that hillside civilizations are quite stable, since if those buildings manage to last as long as they do, completely uncontacted, we can assume that warfare was not often brought to these regions. And I think in the cases of Tuscany and Provence, that's primarily true. Yeah, I mean, they were prosperous, but should always keep in mind that the Mediterranean was full of war, and we shouldn't exactly see them as entirely prosperous and peaceful, as no region of the Mediterranean really was. I think that's it for this video. Hold on, maybe if I can kill this guy. Fucking loser. Okay, yeah, I would have killed the fucking both of you. Alright, I suppose we'll tune out now. Thank you for joining me, to break down Brodel. The next section will be the plains.